Mainly due to COVID restrictions, each candidate is being interviewed individually, and today's candidate is Ross Stalker from the Scottish Liberal Democrat Party. Welcome, Ross. Would you like to make a short opening statement to the voters of Renfrewshire North and West prior to going into the specific questions?
Thank you, Ken. Yes, my name's Ross Stalker. I am the Scottish Liberal Democrat candidate. I've lived in Renfrew since 2010 after graduating from university with a degree in biotechnology. I've been a Lib Dem since 2006, always been a very active campaigner, and it was really the values of social justice but also individual liberation, marrying the two together, that brought me into the party. And I'm standing to promote those values and to help us recover from this, put forward ideas that will help us recover from this pandemic.
Okay, thank you. We'll get into the specific questions now that have been to the forefront of those who wrote in with questions to be asked to the candidates. And obviously, Willie Rennie has been talking about the big three, mental health, social care, and bounce back for children's support, etc. So we'll cover those in the questions, etc. First of all, the pandemic and the recovery. There's no escaping the main area of concern just now is the COVID pandemic. What are the proposals for your roadmap out of this pandemic, and what plans would you put in place to ensure the nation's security against future viruses?
Yeah, well, if I deal with, first of all, the nation's security against future viruses first, because that's my area of expertise, being a biotechnologist. I think the technology that was used to develop these vaccines, it was quite fortuitous that it was available. It wouldn't have been available just a decade ago, so it was quite fortuitous that it was ready to deploy for this pandemic. And in order to shore up against future pandemics on that side of things, it would be good if we could develop a publicly funded bank of pre-vaccines using the same technology for potential future pandemics, so that the rollout of future vaccines could be even faster than this one was. Now that we know the technology works, it would be worth having some public investment there. Okay.
That's good for the future, yeah.
And for our roadmap out of the effects the pandemic has had on our economy. In one sense, our economy needed to change anyway. What with climate change and needing to prioritise green jobs, green industry. So in one way, there are new opportunities, and we need to ensure that the public investment is there to seize those opportunities. I'm a great believer that government can do good and should do good, and there's a role for government to play in investing with a youth jobs guarantee, for example, and retraining grants to help people find their way in the new economy that will emerge.
Okay. Do you have any timescales for these developments, or is it just immediately? Time is of the essence.
Time is of the essence. Yes,
right.
It would be something that we'd be looking to include in the very first budget of the next Parliament.
Yeah, but given the level of borrowing that we're heavily involved in nationwide, and obviously Scotland's got a share of that, do you see the timescales being quite extensive in resolving all that matter?
I think it is. If we don't invest now, you have bigger problems further down the line. You don't prevent public debt by, as we learned from our coalition with the Conservatives and the failure that austerity was. You don't prevent public debt by not doing what needs to be done, because you'll just create further problems down the line.
Yeah. Okay. Right. The second most important one for the voters here in the constituency are the NHS. Obviously, it's come under intense pressure across the board. What are your priorities for its recovery and therefore the ongoing health and well-being of the nation, in taking into account other things beyond COVID itself, the cancers, whatever?
Well, definitely we need to do something to get waiting times down there. The Scottish Government still failing to meet its own targets. We need an expansion of services, more diversity in services people can access locally as well.
Mm-hmm.
So more pathways for referral from your GP, for example, especially where it comes to cancer treatment. There needs to be more capacity for urgent referrals there.
Mm-hmm. Do you see mental health as a major item there, along with social care?
Definitely. With mental health, I'm someone who has been through the mental health system only as an outpatient, but in my case, all I needed was diagnosis and medication.
Mm-hmm.
But even that took far too long,
yes.
Much longer than it would take for a so-called physical condition, although mental health conditions are often physical conditions in the brain as well. Mm-hmm. They're not seen as that way, not prioritised as they should be. So yes, there needs to be more mental health services that people can access without needing to go through a referral. So more in-community support, mental health first aiders in the workplace, and more focus on prevention as well with counsellors in schools.
Okay. And that would need to go across the board with social care as well, in terms of referrals.
Yeah, I mean, we, definitely. We don't believe a national care service is the correct way forward. Mm. We fear that it could end up like Police Scotland, with the best of intentions. Mm. When you centralise too much, it just becomes too difficult to run the service properly. Things don't have to be centralised into one service. What we can have instead is a set of national care standards and ensure that those standards are met by locally run services. And
responding to locally run needs.
Yeah, yes. Indeed. Because different parts of the country have very different social care needs. Very, very different demographics, age-wise, in different parts of Scotland. Different social issues. Some areas of Scotland have issues with drug abuse, whereas other areas don't. And if you have one national care service, there's just a risk that things will get missed. The wrong priorities will be set for an area, and it's people in their area, politicians, local politicians, and local people who know best what their local area needs. So
would you take that down to local government level?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Councils are asked to do a lot already, so I wouldn't say all directly run by government, local government, but local government should definitely have oversight.
Okay. Yeah. Right. The third area is education. Now, one of Willie Rennie's thing is some bounce back to children's support, etc. But obviously, the current year or so has affected quite a lot of young students in primary school and in secondary school in particular. So what's your purpose in trying to make sure that our future education of of our children and Scotland's recovery to a leading educator is retained?
Well, first of all, we need to provide the option for college again. The way colleges have been run down by this government limits people's options and pathways in life. And I went to university, but that's not the right choice for everyone, and it shouldn't be the right choice for everyone. And it didn't exactly, in a sense, work out for me because I didn't end up doing the thing that I studied. So it's that understanding that not everyone is the same is very important in a good education system. But of course, you do have to get the fundamentals right as well, and literacy and numeracy, and we would put teachers in charge of any reforms rather than the sort of top-down reforms that we've seen in the past, where teachers have been given more bureaucracy to deal with, distracting them from the actual job of teaching. And that those standardised tests at primary one, for example, any educational psychologist can tell you there's so many reasons why a 5-year-old is not going to complete a standardised test with any reliability as to measuring their educational progress. It's just too young to be able to measure things by standardised tests. But that's the way this government likes to do things. They like to have figures and targets that can be quite arbitrary, and just so that they can say they're doing things. And it's not the right approach. And that contrasts with our proposal for early years, which is actually to delay the start of formal education to 7, as is done in the Nordic countries. And that doesn't mean you wouldn't have anything that would go before. You'd still have full-time education, but it would be play-based learning rather than formal education, which is a lot more appropriate for that age range. And actually it's something that I feel quite strongly about, in that as an adult with ADHD who was not diagnosed in childhood, the reason I wasn't diagnosed was actually because I was fine with literacy and numeracy, so there wasn't seemed to be any problem because I was, clever. But if I'd been in that kind of environment where it was less about formal education and more focused on the individual needs of the child at early years, then I might have been picked up and diagnosed at that age.
And how you relate to your school pals as well.
Yeah.
At an early stage, how you intermix, if you like.
Indeed.
Communicate. Yeah. Okay. Right. Staying in the union. Okay. This is obviously there's a big shout about wanting independence, and then there's a big shout about wanting to stay in the union. The Liberal Democrats have called for a return to the EU while preserving Scotland's union with the rest of the UK. Given the majority in England who favoured leaving the EU, are these goals not mutually exclusive?
Well, our policy to seek an eventual return to the EU would be based on the consent of the entire UK. We can see that public opinion in England is changing towards Brexit and has been ever since the referendum. I'm quite sure if the referendum had been held at a slightly different time in British politics, if David Cameron had just waited a few years rather than having to hold it that year, we would probably have seen the result go the other way. It was sort of the last gasp of British nationalism, in a sense. And we're now wedded to this forever, as if we can't say, well, yes, we accept Brexit happened, but actually our closest neighbour is still Europe. Our closest relationship is with Europe, and it makes sense because our economy is more like their economy than any other economy, that we would trade with. What is the value in throwing away that relationship for some spurious trade deals that are not even, if they are any better, not much better than what we were getting through the EU anyway, and will certainly not make up for what we've lost. So in answer to that question, I don't think eventually getting consent from the entire UK to rejoin the EU will be an issue. I think that's in our future. I still believe that's in our future. I believe that's where public opinion already lies. But obviously it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow.
No.
So in the meantime, we just need to put forward the case that we shouldn't be cutting all of our ties with Europe. When it comes to making a choice between having a close relationship with Europe as a third country, but still having as close as possible relationship with Europe, we should prioritise that relationship over trade deals elsewhere that are actually not really that valuable and have been hyped up by the Conservatives because they're desperate to show some kind of value in Brexit. So that would be my answer.
Right, so it's a long-term goal, but...
It's about a direction of travel.
Yes, that's good. Right, final question. Many constituents are concerned about the fractious nature of recent politics. And Willie Rennie has said that we need to bring the country together. How do you plan to calm these tensions and return our politics to a less divisive condition?
There's something I think to be said for the art of disagreeing well, and you don't make division disappear by pretending that it doesn't exist. And I think for a long time in our country, we have pretended that divisions don't exist when actually they do. And that's what's coming to the fore. That's what's been seen, long-held beliefs that people might have previously thought to be a personal matter are voiced more openly, and it's not a bad thing for people to disagree. It's just that we're not very used to doing it in this country. We need to find a way to disagree well. We can't expect to agree on everything. So it's about the tone of our politics, but also about understanding that disagreement does not have to mean discord.
Right, as in families falling apart over Brexit and another referendum. Well,
indeed. Yes. I can understand why people voted for Brexit. And what frustrates me is when people who promote Brexit ignore the real effects that it's had on people in favour of their narrative. You know, people have lost their jobs because of Brexit, or people have seen their incomes reduced because of Brexit. People have lost their rights because of Brexit. In some cases, you know, to live where they want to live. So I think, you know, they can have their view, they can be on their side, but they can't just dismiss the consequences of that. And every political decision has real consequences. Every political decision is difficult. Every political decision will have consequences for someone. And showing an awareness of that, I think, goes a long way to building a healthier politics.
Okay. Given this, should there be a hung parliament again, what other parties would you align with to establish a stable Scottish government?
I thought that LibLab Coalition worked pretty well for 3 terms. I would quite like another one of those. But that said, if the SNP are a minority administration again, we would be willing to work with them where we have common ground. We've always done quite well in budget negotiations with them, for example, particularly this year where our MSPs voted for the budget, unlike, you know, Labour and Conservatives voted against. We felt that we'd managed to achieve some significant you know, outcomes in those negotiations that we wanted to put our stamp on, so we made the decision to vote for it. So we're a party that's open to being pragmatic. I mean, we have to be, being the Liberal Democrats, and we so long as we genuinely have common goals, you know, we would work. We would work with an SNP minority administration on those particular goals, but my personal preference would be another LibLab coalition, and I would hope that we could be the radical edge in that coalition, pushing for hopefully some kind of discussion around federalism that might then move up the chain to fix our broken constitution at UK level.
Right, okay. Well, that's all the questions that we have from the voters. Would you like to make a closing statement now?
Sure, yep. So at this election, you can choose here in the West of Scotland region to increase the Liberal Democrat representation in Parliament. Your vote really does count at this election, and I would urge you to give serious consideration to our message of a socially just Scotland and our priorities, putting recovery from this pandemic first, so that we can achieve a fairer society that works for everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Ross, and thank you for giving us the time at our hustings.
Thank you.